The world has been wiped clean, and it's like you're the last man on Earth. I mean, just really listen to those words for a second. Imagine coughing up seawater, looking around at the exact spot where your life was just moments ago, and seeing absolute total devastation. Every single building, every little beach shack, just completely gone. This was the harrowing, literal reality for survivors of the 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami.
Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most unprecedented natural disasters in modern human history. We're going to walk chronologically through the timeline of the 2004 tsunami. But we're not just looking at the massive, unimaginable statistics, We're diving into the real, raw experiences of the people who actually lived it, and that absolutely desperate race against time to save lives when the world was quite literally washed away.
Section 1. The day the world changed.
So to truly wrap your head around this event, you've got to ground yourself in the crazy sensory contrast of that morning. It was an idyllic, gorgeous day. Crystal clear skies. Survivors remember doing entirely normal vacation things, strolling through vibrant local marketplaces, just lounging by hotel pools. And then, in literally a matter of moments, a massive wall of water hit. The illusion of safety was just shattered in seconds. One survivor actually describes the water rising above his chest instantly. He reached out, desperately grabbing his partner Rachel by her bikini straps just to hold on to her. But the sheer force of the water snapped the straps, and she went sailing past him right into the torrent. In the immediate aftermath, these ordinary, beautiful tropical vacations were reduced to what one guy simply called Armageddon, with bodies suddenly scattered all across the beach. And you have to understand, it wasn't just a really bad flood. It was an incredibly violent, kinetic event. If you were unlucky enough to be caught inside a building when that wall of water smashed through the windows, well, everything in that room became a weapon. You were suddenly trapped in this swirling vortex where ordinary, everyday objects were basically trying to kill you. The force was so unbelievably great that people were literally skewered on metal fixtures right in hotel reception areas. Section 2. Triage at Ground Zero. Right, so as the water finally recedes, survivors find themselves completely cut off. It's a terrifyingly isolated new reality with absolutely zero access to professional medical supplies. Someone had to step up and bring order to this chaos. Enter Cece. First thing they did was desperately try to find anyone with any kind of medical background. Now, Cece worked in psychiatry, but when someone basically told her, well, you're it, she took charge. Step 2 was pure improvisation. She's telling people to grab broken wooden slots straight out of the debris to use as splints for shattered legs. Step 3, prioritization. Cece had to instantly transform into a battlefield commander, triaging these awful injuries and making split-second life-or-death priority calls for an evacuation helicopter that, frankly, they weren't even entirely sure was coming. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible, almost impossible medical realities Cece was facing on the ground. Take a survivor named Sally, for example. She had this deep, open stomach gash that eyewitnesses said literally looked like a shark attack. Plus, her heel was completely severed. Cece had to look at this horrific, catastrophic trauma and face a really brutal truth. Sally was getting weaker by the minute, she was losing a ton of blood, and she simply would not survive the night without getting to a real hospital. But Sally obviously wasn't the only one living through a nightmare. There was a 25-year-old woman named Safi Modin, recently engaged, whole life ahead of her, who suddenly found herself pinned hard under heavy rubble on her stomach. And the physical pain is one thing, right? But the psychological toll here was just immense. She was forced to lie there, helplessly screaming out for aid while actually listening as a man trapped just a few meters below her slowly stopped breathing.
Section 3. The power of strangers. So as the day drags on and absolutely no official rescue agencies are showing up to pluck them from the disaster, you start seeing these desperate ad hoc rescue efforts by totally ordinary people. Out of nowhere, a ferry appears on the horizon. A survivor named Paul, who had actually been watching over the severely injured Sally we talked about, sees this boat approaching the pier and just makes a massive decision. He said, not a flipping chance am I missing that boat. And despite all the chaos, Paul fought tooth and nail to get Sally over the edge and onto that crowded, frantic deck, basically saving her life. And then we go back to Sophie, who is still trapped down in that rubble. Eventually, she hears voices and calls out, realizing they're these Swedish strangers. Now, the men hesitated at first, and honestly, you can't blame them. They're evaluating some massive risks. They didn't even have shoes on, and this collapsed building was highly unstable, ready to give way. But they looked at her and said, we promise we will get back to get you. And amazingly, remarkably, it was a promise kept. They actually came back with more people and pulled her right out of the wreckage. Meanwhile, back at Cece's makeshift triage center, right as the sun is setting, a helicopter finally touches down. The sheer collective relief was just palpable, and the teamwork that followed was incredible to see. A woman named Kimmy instantly steps up to translate for the pilot. Cece meticulously directs the absolute most severely wounded to board the chopper first. And perhaps the most touching detail of all? Ordinary, completely uninjured survivors instinctively ran up and grabbed bedsheets to physically shield the open wounds of the injured from the blowing sand that was being violently whipped up by the chopper blades. Just total strangers fiercely caring for one another.
Section 4. The unprecedented skill. Okay, we need to zoom out for a second. While all these incredibly intense, deeply personal stories of survival were playing out on the beaches, global newsrooms and government officials halfway across the world were just beginning to wake up to the completely incomprehensible magnitude of the tragedy. Those very first official meetings were grim, sure, but they were modest. The initial estimates trickling in suggested that maybe around 100 people were dead. But then, the numbers began to multiply, and fast. The estimate suddenly jumps to 7,000. Emergency services are totally overwhelmed. Communications across the region are entirely wiped out, and major connecting roads were literally washed away into the sea. Next update, 12,000. And this is when a really terrifying dread starts sinking into the global newsrooms. They suddenly realized they were getting absolutely zero information from the areas closest to the earthquake's epicenter, places like Aceh, Indonesia. Just total silence. As one CNN anchor somberly pointed out later, the reason they weren't hearing anything from those places was simply because those places were just gone.
And that brings us to the staggering final death toll. Over 230,000 people. Just let that sink in for a moment. Nearly 250,000 human beings were wiped off the face of the planet in a single day.
But, we really can't let a number that massive blind us to the profound human tragedy it actually represents. When camera crews finally made it to Banda Aceh weeks later, they found this young boy just wandering the beach. For 2 entire weeks, this little child had been completely alone, surviving by eating scavenged packets of dried noodles and sleeping right next to dead bodies in the water. That right there is the true, absolutely heartbreaking scale of this disaster.
Section 5, Preparing for the Future. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why we have to talk about what happened next. Because we must make a critical pivot here from the emotional devastation to the actual science and the systemic failures that allowed it to get this bad, the fatal blind spot of this whole event. Back in 2004, there were absolutely zero tsunami warning systems in place for Thailand, Indonesia, or Sri Lanka. None. And this is a tragic irony, really, because the tsunami wave took up to 12 hours to travel across the ocean to some of these places. There was time. But thousands upon thousands of people died simply because the Indian Ocean had absolutely no early alert infrastructure to tell them what was coming.
Think about the contrast. In 2004, assessing the seismic data to issue any kind of warning would have taken hours, and the broadcast systems didn't even exist in the region anyway. But today, global systems are actively in place, and modern warning centers can process that exact same data in a matter of minutes. The horrific vulnerabilities of the past have drastically, fundamentally shaped the safety protocols we rely on in the present.
Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from this explainer is the profound balance between devastating natural power and just incredible human resilience. As Cece, who remember, saved so many lives that day, put it, when things are at their darkest, people will want to help. That is the wonderful power of the human spirit. Out of unprecedented, almost unimaginable destruction came hundreds and hundreds of selfless acts of heroism. But as we honor those we lost, and the incredible people who stepped up to save complete strangers, we also have to look forward. Scientists say with absolute certainty that a seismic event as bad or even worse will happen again. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. When the next wave comes, will the world truly be ready? Keep learning, keep asking the hard questions,